Fitness, the president of Judicial Watch, and he joins us tonight. Tom, great to see you.
Hey, thanks.
So there was some confusion when we first learned that this deputy in charge of protecting the students, there was some speculation that perhaps he'd been told not to, or that the department required him to wait for backup. Not true.
No, the manual says he may go in, and the training materials that we obtained under the Florida Sunshine Law, the classes and the materials show you're instructed to try to stop the shooter as soon as you're able, whether you're one deputy, two deputies showing up, three or four. And the language is pretty striking. They say every time you hear a shot, you can presume another person is being killed. And so the instructions are to try to confront the shooter as quickly as possible, because the analysis was, after Columbine, as soon as the shooter is confronted by an individual who's armed, whether it be a police officer, a school security officer, or a civilian who's carrying a concealed weapon, the shooter engages, shoots back and forth, or commits suicide. Either way, the shooting of innocents stops. And it's upsetting to read these documents knowing what actually happened that day, and it shows a failure by Broward County Sheriff's Department either to properly train his officers, or in the case of maybe the current officer who had to resign in disgrace, obviously he ignored the training if indeed he followed it.
So this wasn't some hidden thing. This wasn't esoteric. It was in the training manual. And I think that's relevant because Sheriff Israel, in the days after the shooting, went to the CNN gun control rally and sat on the stage and blamed armed citizens, blamed the middle of the country basically for what happened, and never mentioned the failures of his deputy. But he must have known that this was the protocol. Wouldn't he have known that?
That's right. And you know, other deputies arrived and they didn't go into the building as quickly as they should have either. And they talk about if you have 4 deputies go in, you're supposed to form up in a quad, they call it, a diamond formation, and go in and confront the shooter. It's, you know.
So there were, just to be clear, I think there were 4 deputies outside armed during the shooting,
and
correct?
Who did not immediately enter the building. Peterson was there, 3 others showed up, and it took them a bit to enter the building. And Peterson should have been there immediately. He could have gone in by himself. Another deputy arrives. They could have gone in together. They recommend if you go in together, there's a technique for approaching a shooter if you're just a 2-man team. What's frustrating about this, you see this material and you recognize what the failure was in Parkland that led to the needless deaths.
Yes.
And we suffered through these ridiculous demonstrations yesterday. They weren't ridiculous. I mean, kids, you know, fear for their safety. They came out and said what they thought. But it has nothing to do with what the situation in Parkland was, which was a failure of law enforcement to follow their own protocols to protect innocent civilians. And on top of that, we now know about the FBI failing to follow up on tips.
So the authorities failed to protect us. They lied about it and blamed us.
That's right. And now the talk is with the politicians, we're going to take away guns. And it has nothing to do with protecting kids in schools.
So rather than accept blame, they turn it outward on the population.
They're incredible documents. And, you know, frankly, your viewers should go look at them. They're going to be pretty darn upset when they see what the training was, because they're going to see the training as being extremely informative. And my gosh, if it had been followed, lives would have been saved.
Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Well, left-wing politicians turned out yesterday in large numbers to support the students who walked out of school to join anti-gun protests. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo prostrated himself literally before these new Red Guards while joining in chants borrowed from Latin American revolutionaries. Watch this.
What do we want? What do we want it now? What do we want? What do we want it now? The students united will never be defeated. The students united will never be defeated. Enough is enough.
That was not the CNN anchor. That was his rhythm-challenged brother, buffoon. Senator Bernie Sanders participated as well, by the way.
Young people here demanding that we have the courage to take on the NRA, to pass common sense gun safety legislation that the vast majority of the American people want. It is a beautiful day, and these are beautiful young people.
Do you think?
So Sanders and Cuomo attended these rallies, but they didn't go alone. They were escorted by bodyguards paid for by you who went to protect them. Those bodyguards were armed, of course, with guns. Cuomo's bodyguards will have to carry more than 10 rounds in their magazines. Now, if you wanted to protect yourself in the same way in New York, you'd be thrown in prison, and some people, of course, already have been. There's no ambiguity here. In a republic, and we're supposed to live in one, the rulers cannot hold themselves to standards different from the ruled. They're not nobles. They're citizens, just like you and me. You can't surround yourself with an armed retinue and then tell the rest of us we don't have a right to defend ourselves. That's worse than flying your private jet to accept a climate change award. Ethan Behrman is a radio show host in California, and he joins us tonight. So, Ethan, it seems pretty simple. I'm actually not calling for disarming bodyguards. I think the threats out there are real. I happen to know that they are. I'm just hoping that we can have the same standard for our rulers and the ruled. If I can't have a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds, why do Andrew Cuomo's bodyguards, whom I'm paying for, get to do that?
Interestingly enough, I was not aware that his bodyguards did. I know in the case of Bernie Sanders, those were standard law enforcement issued sidearms that were 10-round magazines.
They're not 10-round magazines. Hold on, wait. I'm not bragging, but I do actually know about this. A Glock mag has more than 10 in it. They don't have 10-round magazines. They have magazines bigger than you're allowed in New York if you're non-law enforcement. So we're paying their bodyguards to carry. No, okay, they're not allowed in New York. They're allowed in Vermont. I'm just saying all law enforcement. They don't limit their rounds in their magazines. Why would they do that? That's insane. But they're asking that we do it, even as we pay for their bodyguards to be better armed. How does that work?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree and disagree with you. So first off, Andrew Cuomo's bodyguards should be stuck with the same limit that we are calling for, which is a 10-round magazine. Other than special teams for law enforcement, like SWAT teams and whatnot, they'll have very special circumstances that they would have greater round magazines at their disposal for specific situations. But the average law enforcement officer should be carrying a 10-round magazine, just like we would call for anybody else in a standard semi-automatic configuration.
What do you think they'll do something wrong with it? I mean, I'm actually not arguing to disarm the police. I'm arguing to let people
I'm not either.
have the same protection that their rulers, that their politicians have, whose salaries we're paying. Why would you want to, in effect, lower the effectiveness of a bodyguard?
Well, because what is the circumstance where you're going to need more than 10-round magazines? Better yet, here's the argument that actually a lot of my friends who are deeply into firearms make is larger than 10-round magazines have a higher percentage rate of jamming. You're actually hurting the opportunity of the law enforcement officer to do their job properly.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they're kind of experts on this question, though. I mean, I think your average cop knows a lot more about what makes an effective firearm than your average, in my case, cable news host. But let's let them decide. But can we just agree that politicians shouldn't be allowed to set one standard for themselves above the standard they require of everyone else? That's like a basic democratic principle the left used to be for, I thought.
Yeah, and actually we do agree in that, and that's why I am saying that his bodyguards should be limited. If he is calling for 10-round magazine limits, and like you said in New York, that is the case, then the bodyguards should have that same limitation, which is a 10-round magazine. I agree with you. There is a hypocrisy that is happening there that I don't agree with either.
But, I mean, this is universal. I mean, it's not just that. I mean, politicians of all kinds, ones you agree with and ones you don't agree with, have all kinds of people with semi-automatic carbines underneath their trench coats. I mean, they're very heavily armed. The government, including local law enforcement, has military vehicles. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? You're setting up a class of people who are cutting themselves off from the people they're supposed to be ruling in the most hypocritical possible way. I don't know. Why not just pass a law that says you can't pass any gun control that your bodyguards don't abide by? Would you be for that? We could just settle the argument right there.
I mean, the bodyguard specifically, I don't agree with you on the local law enforcement. Local law enforcement is dealing with issues that requires them to have things like bear cats. We've seen them used very successfully now in a number of operations across the country. Local law enforcement and the state police powers require that the state have an opportunity to arm more like the military than your average citizen.
Look,
and by the way, Scalia said as much in the 2008 D.C. versus Heller that we can
just simplify it? Can we simplify it? And I wonder if we get the Brady people and the Bloomberg people on board with this. No politician can vote for any piece of gun control legislation that he or she would not apply to him or herself. I mean, why wouldn't you do that?
I'm all for that, 100%.
Good.
No, I actually totally agree with you on that point, that the politicians should have to abide by what they're imposing on the rest of us. But I separate the police differently because you brought up the police.
I think that's probably a fair point. I think that's right. Really quickly, I don't know if you've got kids, but I think a lot of parents looked at what happened yesterday, even if they agreed with the gun control sentiments and said, you know, you probably shouldn't be using kids as political props. Would you have been okay with it if teachers were bringing kids to some kind of right-wing march or pro-gun march or Milo Yiannopoulos march? Would that have been okay with you?
Well, so interestingly enough, I don't want teachers necessarily doing that. I want them to teach the background. I want them to teach a history, maybe explain what's going on. But I want the kids to do it on their own. And actually here in California, it was mostly the kids doing it on their own. And I fully support them speaking out, defending their idea of being safe in their educational facilities.
All right. Ethan Behrman, great to see you. Thanks for coming on. Former FBI Director Andrew McCabe is just days from retirement. He could be canned before he retires. Does he deserve that? That story is next with details. The FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility has recommended that former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe be fired from the Bureau for serious misconduct. According to news reports, the recommendation comes because McCabe authorized disclosing sensitive information to reporters, leaking illegally, and then lied to investigators about it when they asked. McCabe has already announced his retirement, which is set to take effect on Sunday. If he's fired before then, he could lose some of the benefits he is due from the federal government, tax dollars. Joe DeGenova is a former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, and he joins us tonight. Joe, thanks for coming on. So I just wanted to, I want to clear the air on this specific question. I'm not an expert. I'm watching that lady in the afternoons over at MSNBC scream about how this is immoral to punish this guy. Has he done something worth punishment, do you think?
He's done a number of things worth punishment, including careening through obstruction of justice by, from the beginning of the Trump campaign, doing everything he could to exonerate Hillary Clinton in the email server case corruptly. And then, if Hillary didn't win the presidency, to figure out a way to falsely claim that Donald Trump had committed a crime. Even though that's not what he's being fired for, that's certainly ultimately what he should be assigned responsibility for. He should be fired. He should have been fired a long time ago. And if he loses some of his benefits, that's good for the country. It's the least that can be done to him.
What are the consequences of having high-level law enforcement officers who have the power of life and death over the rest of us lying, caught lying? What does that mean for us?
It means that the system of equal justice has been rent asunder by the conduct of James Comey, America's best-known dirty cop, Andrew McCabe, and others, including senior Obama administration Justice Department officials. This is a moment in history that has sullied the reputation of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and deservedly so. Every one of these people should be put in a wanted poster at a post office, even though they may never be arrested. What they have done to the department and the FBI is undermine the confidence of the American people in federal law enforcement. It is disgraceful, and it all stems from their animus toward President Trump. It is despicable.
So the media are supposed to be watchdogs, ever vigilant against the abuse of power. This would be a profound abuse of power if true. Why are they making excuses for it, do you think?
They're making excuses for it because they, like Comey and McCabe and the senior Obama DOJ people, hate Donald Trump. And they believe that anything, including violating every known standard of federal law enforcement, is justified to either keep him from office or, if elected, take him out of office. It is one of the worst moments in the history of American law enforcement, and the shame is on Comey and everybody associated with it.
So as a procedural matter, if an FBI official is caught lying to internal investigators, to their IG or whatever department within the Bureau did the investigation, isn't that just prima facie cause for firing right there?
It is, and it's also a violation of the false statement federal statute, and it's a crime.
Huh, because it's a crime for you or me to lie to the FBI, correct?
It is indeed, and it's a crime for Mr. McCabe to do so.
So Mike Flynn has seen his life destroyed because he lied to the FBI, supposedly. He pled to it. McCabe lies to the FBI, and what's-her-name over at MSNBC screams about how he might be punished for it. Unbelievable.
The people in the media have given up on being objective or caring about anything than hating Trump. Shame on them.
Yeah, I mean, rule of law, kind of bigger than Trump, I would say. Anyway, Joe, thank you. Great to see you.
My pleasure.
A group of immigrants to this country is suing the Trump administration. They claim they can't be deported because it would be racist. An ACLU attorney who supports them joins us next.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Trace Gallagher. Tragedy striking at Florida International University in Miami, where a just-installed pedestrian bridge came crashing down onto a busy street below. Local officials now say at least 4 people are dead, but right now there is still not an official death toll. A doctor at the Kendall Regional Medical Center says they received 10 injured people. 2 of them are in extremely critical condition. A frantic search for survivors remains underway, with rescuers using everything from canines to heavy equipment and cranes to make contact with anybody who might still be trapped beneath that bridge. The National Transportation Safety Board is at the scene and is in the process of launching a full investigation on this. We will keep you updated. Stay with Fox News Channel for breaking details on the Miami bridge collapse. If news breaks out, we'll break in. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to Tucker Carlson tonight.
Well, in the last year, and this is a relatively new thing, the American left has united behind a new theory of citizenship in the United States. Anybody from around the world can come here for any reason. And once they're here, they never have to leave, no matter what the original justification for being here is. And if you disagree, you're a bigot. The U.S. has a designation called temporary protected status for immigrants from certain countries. We have this because we're a kind country. We try to help. The status is supposed to be a short-term measure, letting people remain in the U.S. if their country suffers a calamity, like a natural disaster, an earthquake, flood, whatever. This program has been around for a long time, and it has been badly abused. El Salvador, for example, received TPS in 2001 after a series of earthquakes. It still has it today. 1/3 of all Salvadorans on the globe now live in the United States. Honduran immigrants have enjoyed temporary status since 1998. Haitians have had it since 2010. The Trump administration has said, geez, this is supposed to be temporary. Let's make it temporary and let the status of some countries expire. Well, in response, the left is revealing what they really think about temporary. They were actually permanent all along. With the support of the ACLU, several immigrants are suing the Trump administration, saying they can't be deported. They claim that the president has described some countries as terrible places to live, therefore he's a bigot. Never mind, the entire justification for letting immigrants come here in the first place is that their countries were terrible places to live. The only thing that matters is this single principle to the left. Anybody can live in the U.S. and they should never be forced to leave, ever. We think that's the principle, but to explain it to us, Ahilan Arul Anandan is legal director of the ACLU of Southern California, and he joins us tonight. Ahilan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So there's an obvious internal contradiction here, which I'm sure you've pondered before, which is these plaintiffs whom you're representing are saying that it was bigoted of the president to describe certain countries as hellholes, crappy places to live, and yet the justification for their being here anyway and not returning is that those countries are exactly what President Trump said they were. So how does that work?
Yeah, I don't think that's quite how we see it, Tucker. You know, I think the government can create a temporary program for people to say 6, 12, even 18 months. But these are countries where people have been lawfully residing here under this U.S. program for almost 20 years, in some cases more than 20 years. And all we're saying is that when the government then wants to change the program and take away their status, tear apart their families, their U.S. citizen children who've been here or in high school, it has to have a very good reason to do that. You know, and they don't have, obviously, a very good reason here.
But may I just say that, but hold on, isn't the reason itself inherent in the program? It was a temporary, this wasn't permanent resettlement of people who wanted a better standard of living. Well, we've done it for a lot of people, but this specific program was to say, your country's a disaster, you can come here till it's better. 1/3 of all Salvadorans on planet Earth now live in the United States. So there's been a massive resettlement here. Why is it unfair to hold them to the standards we agreed on in the first place?
Well, 2 things, Tucker. You know, first, it's not a question of whether or not you can have a good reason to terminate it. It's the question is, did the government actually have such a reason here? Right. So we know that there was a bipartisan proposal, Republicans and Democrats, that proposed to the president granting permanent residence to these people because they've lived here so long, and he rejected that in this meeting where he made this comment that I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. That
well, don't. I mean, everyone knows what, but hold on, that's not relevant actually, because none of that became law. So he had a conversation with someone. It didn't go through the Congress. No executive orders were issued. So it's not really material to the statutes on the book now, which describe a temporary program, and you're saying that it can't be temporary because why?
No, it definitely can be temporary, Tucker. Our point is this: once it's happened for a long time, right? So, and some of our plaintiffs are not just immigrants, right? There's like the 14-year-old high school student born and raised in Northern California who's studying government, who's studying the Constitution, who knows that the Due Process Clause protects persons and not just citizens. She now has to either leave the only country that she's ever known to go live with her parents in El Salvador, or her family has to be broken apart. There's 100,000 other children in the same position.
I mean, look, you're not going to surprise me with stories about people suffering, because a lot of people are suffering, including millions of American citizens, and I feel sorry for all of them, immigrant and American alike. That's not really the question. The question is what's the best for the country. But the question also unresolved, which you have not yet answered, is, are they saying either that it was racist to describe their home countries as terrible places, or are they saying that their home countries are terrible places and that's why they can't go back? You can't really say both, can you?
No, I think the position in the lawsuit, and certainly if you look at the designations that supports this, is that the justifications for granting temporary protected status to people from El Salvador and Haiti and Sudan and Nicaragua remain in place today. The countries continue to be racked by violence.
But about Trump's, so Trump's comments, the ones that were reported, and we don't really know exactly what he said, but I'm willing to believe he said that, because it's true, by the way. A lot of these countries are hellholes. Are you taking issue with that? Are you saying that it's wrong to call Haiti a hellhole, but no one here from Haiti can be returned to Haiti because it's a hellhole? I mean, will you just engage with that core thing?
Right, yeah, no, Tucker. What the president is reported to have said is that we don't want people from these asshole countries,
right?
And so it was an expression of animus against them. And it's not the only statement. I mean, the president has made many statements about, everybody from Haiti has AIDS. I don't want to go through them all, but a number of really derogatory statements against people from these countries.
Who cares? Why is that relevant? Look, we just engage with this fact: 1/3 of all Salvadorans in the world live in the United States. So it's not like we have special animus towards Salvadorans. 1/3 of their entire population lives here. It's kind of hard to argue that we're racist against Salvadorans, isn't it?
No, it's not about in fact, America is not, as a whole, racist against it. And we have a long history of people from China after Tiananmen Square, from Hungary back in the 50s and 60s after the problems there, people obviously from Central America as well, that we have allowed welcome to this country because of the problems that are existing in those countries.
But
and the
20
problem here
years is not
people
temporary.
Want to do... Exactly, Tucker. And if the government had ended this program, as they did, for example, with the Ebola temporary
so if we hadn't been
statuses
so nice, we wouldn't be punished for it. Wait, you just perfectly crystallized the whole problem with our country and Western civilization itself. If we hadn't been so nice, we wouldn't be under attack now. We're being sued because we made the mistake of being kind to immigrants. That's what you're arguing.
Well, no, I think we've sued because when the government wants to tear a set of families apart, we're talking about American children, school-age children, it has to have very good reasons for doing that.
But
we don't think the government has shown...
Okay. If they're not asshole countries, then it's not so terrible to go home. Right, I get it. I'm sure they're nice. I think these are fair questions. We're out of time, and Helen, but thank you for coming on and explaining that. I appreciate it. The friendly skies are not so friendly for dogs. Dogs are dying on airlines. Not enough people care. We do care. We're going to investigate that next. Dogs are dying on commercial airlines. United Airlines is apologizing after a flight attendant forced a woman to put her dog into an overhead bin, and the dog suffocated there and died. Meanwhile, another family had its dog shipped to Japan by mistake. It's not clear if this is a problem particular to United Airlines, but according to the most recent statistics, of all major airlines, they were responsible for 3/4 of all dog deaths. Mark Stein is an author and columnist and dog lover. Cheryl Casoni is a former flight attendant and obviously an anchor now for Fox Business. They both join us. Thanks both for coming on. Cheryl, first to you. You were a flight attendant.
Yeah.
Can you imagine yourself telling a patron, a customer, to put her dog in an overhead bin?
Never in a million years would a flight attendant, I believe, knowingly put anything living or breathing in an overhead bin. You just don't do that. That is absolutely not what is happening. I do believe the flight attendant did not hear when they were saying it was a dog. I don't think this flight attendant knew that they were putting a dog into an overhead bin. There's no circulation. There's no air in those overhead bins. And I also don't think that the flight crew heard the dog barking, even though passengers say that they did.
Yeah, I wonder why no one stood up and freed the dog. But I think that's probably a completely fair point. Mark, what does this tell us about air travel or dogs or American society? What are the bigger lessons here?
Well, I think one of the lessons is that air travel is the most controlled environment in any free society. I take, for example, what Cheryl said. It might well be true that the flight attendant did not hear what the passenger was saying, that there was a dog in the carrier. But in that case, and it might well be true that the flight attendant did not hear any barking. But then again, you have to think, well, would that mean she wouldn't hear the guy going Allahu Akbar? She wouldn't notice the sound of him striking the match as he attempts to light his shoes. We have turned an air travel into the most controlled environment in a free country. And as a result, and I don't absolve the flight attendant quite as thoroughly as Cheryl does, but I think what's really disturbing here is the behavior of all the passengers, including the dog owners. No passenger, I say this, I mean, I get so annoyed about this story. I have a dog who's very sick and has required specialized treatment at Tufts and up in Montreal and down at some place in Pennsylvania. And the thought that if I'd carelessly made the mistake of flying to Philadelphia, this could have happened to my beloved dog, terrifies me. If you hear a dog in a compartment, you don't record it on your cell phone. You don't tell a reporter afterwards that you heard barking. You stand up like a free-born citizen and you liberate that animal.
And Tucker, you risk being fined by the FAA. But wait a minute, interference with a flight crew, that is a federal offense. The FBI is going to be right there at the end of the flight to take you off. I mean, look, how many times have you seen people dragged off planes?
Hold on. Let me just ask you this, and you may be entirely right, but since you've lived this, worked on an airline, do you really think if a dog barked in the middle of the flight and someone stood up and, as Mark said, liberated the dog, the FBI would arrest that person?
No, of course not. What I'm saying is that passengers are afraid.
Yes, no, you're right.
That is, you're afraid of being arrested. You're afraid of ending up on video. Look at what happened with United and the doctor last year that was dragged off the plane. They also are responsible for the death of a huge pet rabbit. I mean, they've got a horrible record with animals. 18 deaths last year of the 24 that were recorded in the entire industry were on United Airlines planes. But again, passengers are afraid, Tucker, because you know what the fine could be? Even the civil penalties could go up to $250,000 if you interfere with a flight crew. People were afraid. I think this mother and daughter were scared to say anything, and I think the passengers were as well.
That's why we have to end this, Tucker, because we're training human beings, we're training free-born citizens to behave like domestic pets, docile and spayed. Because we're frightened that if we point out there's a dog in the overhead bin, then we'll be dragged off in manacles and subjected to the TSA or whatever. At a certain point, you know, this is the post-9/11 environment, as a result of which we still let in guys who run down people on the New York bike path and blow up Christmas parties in San Bernardino, but we shuffle shoeless like animals. Generally speaking, if you see someone without shoes in public, it's an animal. We have turned ourselves into animals in this post-9/11 environment.
God, that's so true. Cheryl, really quickly, how does an airline send someone's dog to Japan?
Well, yeah, United is also being criticized today because they got two dogs mixed up. They think it happened on the tarmac in Denver when the dogs were taken off the planes. They switched them by accident. This is the dog. Ergo, this dog went to Japan instead of going to Kansas City. That dog, by the way, is right now being flown first class back to the United States by United. So
First class on United, isn't that good?
The record is not good, Tucker. It is not good. United and that CEO need to deal with this.
I mean, society
now.
really is judged by how it treats its dogs, I think. That's why we're better than Pakistan. Thank you both. That was great and deep. Mark, Cheryl, appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
Time for Final Exam. Have you been paying attention to all the news this week? You can pit yourself against our news experts to find out. That's coming up next. Time now for the most intense part of the show, Final Exam. We pit two news professionals against one another to see who has done a better job of staying informed. Tonight, Fox Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, a perennial champion. He's won 3 matchups in a row. That puts him 1/3 of the way to matching Shannon Bream's run of dominance last year. His challenger this week is Fox News national correspondent Lauren Blanchard. And it's nice to see you, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
What do you mean in my place?
What do you mean in your place?
It's not even close to what Shannon Bream did.
A little context here.
Shannon did it.
I know Shannon's kind of the platonic ideal. Okay, you know the rules. I'll just explain to you and for our audience who doesn't. Hannah buzzers. I ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer. You have to wait until I finish asking the question, however, in order to do so. Every correct answer is worth 1 point. You get it a little wrong, you lose a point. Best of 5 wins. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
All right.
Good luck to you.
Good luck. Question 1. This is multiple choice now. President Trump was in California this week to look at some border wall prototypes. The president said the top of the wall needs to have a certain design feature to keep out aggressive climbers. What kind of design does he want? Is it A, the need to be round, B, need to have barbed wire, or C, need to be covered in spikes? Lauren.
He wants it to be see-through, but he wants the top of it to be round. A.
Not with broken wine bottles.
Not with
round.
Not with broken
okay,
wine
we're going to go to
bottles.
the tape and see if you've been paying attention. To the tape.
The round piece that you see up here, or you see more clearly back there, the larger it is, the better it is, because it's very hard to get over the top. It's really deterrent from getting over the top.
Correct.
Who would think? Who would think? But getting over the top is easy. These are like professional mountain climbers.
You know who would think? Lauren Blanchard would think. She got that right. Wow, nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Like she did a piece on this.
I'm on Twitter a lot.
Question 2, another multiple choice. Hillary Clinton was in India this week, and she's still pretty upset about the election results. She told an audience that she was well on her way to winning over all the white women, but she lost them because of the shady dealings of one man. Who was that man? Was it Russian President Vladimir Putin? Was it former President Barack Obama? Was it former FBI Director Jim Comey? Ed Henry.
C, Comey.
Comey. It could, by the way, it could have been any of them.
Right.
And at different times, it probably was any of them, according to Hillary. But here's what she said in India.
I was on the way to winning white women until former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, dropped that very ill-advised letter on October the 28th. We're being told she's going to jail. You know, you don't want to vote for her. You know, it's going to be terrible. You can't vote for that.
All right.
See, I thought honestly it was either the Trilateral Commission or Vladimir Putin who tanked her with
There
white
really were
women.
one of 70 different
Yeah,
answers.
that's exactly right. But you picked the right one for the purposes of our show. Question 3. Despite countless violent lyrics and past gun charges, which rapper blasted American gun owners anyway at a Sunday award show? Lauren Blanchard.
From my home state of Michigan, Eminem.
Eminem. Wait, he's got gun charges, but he attacked gun owners. Can that be true? Let's find out.
Home country is going nuts, and NRA is in our way. They're responsible for this whole production. They hold the strings to control the public. And they threaten to take away donor bucks, so they know the government won't do nothing, and no one's watching. Gun owners clutching their loaded weapons. They love their guns more than our children.
I'm not buying his new album now. But you were right. Boy, the hypocrisy alarm just went off.
I'm starting to sweat.
Unbelievable. Okay, so I'm not even, it's 2-1.
Okay.
All right, Ed, here's your chance. Question 4. Amazon, the company, claiming its latest victim. Which iconic brick-and-mortar chain is now closing all of its stores because of making no money? Oh, Lauren Blanchard, again.
Toys R Us. They're closing or selling off all of their U.S. stores.
I don't believe you, but let's check the tape. Is it Toys R Us?
Toys R Us, and it's going out of business. If you do have a gift card, use it up immediately because once the store closed down, that is usually it. But Toys R Us did inform employees yesterday that it would be closing up all of its nearly 800 stores here in the United States.
Man, we hear a lot about the blue wave. You are the blue wave. By the way, a Michigan graduate.
Michigan grad.
Final question. Lab results show that after a year in space, astronaut Scott Kelly is no longer identical to his identical twin brother Mark. There's now a major biological difference between the two of them. What is that difference? Lauren.
It's DNA. Their DNAs are now different.
That can't be right.
It is right.
Well, you make stuff up. You come on the show. Their DNA can't be different.
It is. One of them is 2 inches taller now.
Let's check the tape.
A groundbreaking new study, NASA scientists found that Kelly's DNA had been altered when he came back down to Earth.
7% of Scott Kelly's genes did not return to normal following his return to Earth 2 years ago, suggesting that now the identical twins are no longer completely identical.
Ed, if it's any consolation, she would have just whipped me. I couldn't have handled that. You know what? You kept your dignity in the face of that onslaught. You are the new winner, and you get our Eric Wemple mug.
Well, shoot.
It's a Tucker mug.
But it's Eric Wemple of the Washington Post.
And it's you.
Yeah, I'm on one side. He's facing his Waterloo on the other. Drink coffee with it, with pride, knowing that you were the winner of this week's final exam. And it's great to see you.
Congratulations.
And I know you'll be back.
I couldn't even keep up.
I know, but we're going to see you again, I know for a fact. That's it for final exam this week. Pay attention to the news all week. And tune in on Thursday to see if you can win. Support for overt racial discrimination on the left is rising by the day. It's basically universal by now, though hardly anyone ever says anything about it. Just yesterday, HuffPost deputy opinion editor Chloe Angel bragged on Twitter about how the company accepts or rejects writers based on their skin color rather than on what they write. Angel tweeted this: month 2 of HuffPo opinion is almost done. Our goals for this month were less than 50% white authors, check. Asian representation that matches or exceeds the U.S. population, check. More trans and non-binary authors, check. But I want to do better. Chloe wants to do better. Larry Elder is a radio host and a wise man, and he joins us tonight. Larry, I didn't think that people were supposed to talk this way, and I didn't think anyone wanted to live in a country where you're judged exclusively on factors you can't control. How did we get here?
Well, that's a good question, because I thought the goal was a colorblind society where people were evaluated based upon the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But I guess that's not the case when it comes to the left. Now, this woman who said that they met all their diversity goals, I understand she's a white female. Does that mean that she's willing to step down in favor of a better qualified or equally qualified female of color?
Or less qualified? No, of course not. And it never is the case. The people who are implementing this are almost, in my experience, exclusively white, but they never put themselves in that same category. They never give up their sinecures, their overpaid, low-work jobs to help anybody else. But it's not just. I think it's misleading to say this is just like HuffPo, which is a joke, obviously, or the left, which is already discredited. But this is like universal in corporate America, universal, and academia.
And what's scary about it, Tucker, is I don't want to get on an American airline plane or a Delta airline plane and have a company that chose their pilot based upon racial diversity as opposed to quality. That's the problem with this. You have schools, for example, that are lowering standards in order to achieve diversity. And what's happening is a disproportionately large number of these students that, quote unquote, benefit from lower standards drop out. So you're hurting the very people that you're trying to help. Why don't we do something about improving K through 12 so that kids in the inner city graduate and can read, write, and compute at grade level? But the Democratic Party opposes vouchers, which have been proven to be a much better way of achieving that objective than these government schools that you're mandated to go to.
Well, it's such a deep point, and it almost seems like there's a connection. The more that we do kind of symbolic nonsense like that HuffPo lady is doing, the less time we spend worrying about things that matter, like underperforming schools that actually are hurting people of color, by the way, but nobody seems to care anymore. Why is that?
In Philadelphia, Tucker, 40% of the teachers that have school-age kids have them in private schools, as opposed to only 10% nationwide. That's the equivalent of opening up a restaurant and putting up a sign saying, come on in, but don't eat the food.
That is bizarre. So, I mean, this is only about making the ruling class feel good about itself. That seems to be the case. Otherwise, this Chloe woman who got a sociology degree from Princeton, by the way, which is hilariously meaningless, she'd be quitting, right? If she really cared.
I guess, but really, if the Democrats really cared about black people, what they'd be talking about is the large number of black kids that are raised without fathers. It's about 73% now, and in 1970, the number was 25%. The question is, what's caused it to be a tripling of the percentage of kids, black kids born, who were born outside of wedlock? And the answer, in my opinion, Tucker, is the welfare state. What we've done is incentivize women to marry the government. We've allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility, and we're not having a national conversation about that.
I agree with that completely. Larry Elder, I hope to see you more often on the show because it's always great.
Anytime. Anytime.
That's about